I recall at the beginning saying that the comment period was a 15-minute period. We've gone well beyond that. I'm going to allow these next two gentlemen in line to speak, and then we're going to move on. I think perhaps some members of council may or may not have some comments, but we'll move on from there. So, and you are, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Stan Wells. I live at 146 Christopher Avenue here in Wasaga Beach. For 11 years, I sat in one of those chairs up there. So I think I have a little bit of knowledge of Wasaga distribution, Wasaga resources, and geosands and how they operate. So I think I can speak, or at least be perceived to speak, with a little bit of understanding and a little bit of knowledge of the background, the history. I've also lived here for 40-some years. I hate to admit how many. So I'm quite familiar with it in that context. I was hesitant to say anything. I thought, I'll let the other people speak, and the last gentleman probably took most of what I was thinking of saying away from me, but that was good because it got said. But I think if you take the time, which you have done, and look at, just the website of the Ontario Energy Board, for one thing. It rates Wasaga distribution as either the first or second most efficient local utility in all of Ontario. And when you look at the performance indicators that they review, there's a whole list of them. I'm not going to go through them all, but they're ranked on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 being you can't get any better, and 5 being you're in the tube, you're done. Wasaga distribution, OEB ratings, not their own, not yours, not Mark Rogers, OEB ratings, every single rating that the OEB looks at is number 1. You can't get it any better. Now that tells me that if you amalgamate, merge, sell, you're going to be amalgamating, merging, or selling to someone who is not quite at the same level. So now automatically you've reached a lower point in terms of the averaging. Another thing that was talked about was growth. We can't grow, can't sustain. Well, Council, your own high school task force study that you presented to the board as a rationale for getting a high school talks about the huge growth that's coming to Wasaga Beach. Your own efficiency study talks about how you're going to need to build greater and bigger administration centers because of the huge growth that's coming to Wasaga Beach. These are your own 2 studies talking about this incredible growth. And at the same time, with a local utility, they can maintain the things that everybody else has talked about: service, personal touch, speed. Just this weekend, we were out, some parts of this town were out for an hour, maybe less, where just all around us, they were out for many hours. Was that the nature of the circumstance? I don't know. But I can tell you, in the 40-odd years that I've lived here, we certainly have had great service. We've been out very seldom, and that's one of the rankings of the OEB, the outages. They're literally negligible, and the amount of time to restore is negligible. I don't care who takes over if that's your decision, but they're not going to achieve that same level of service. The growth is there to sustain it. Not one of you sitting at that table that I remember during your campaign 2 years ago said anything about Wasaga distribution or the potential sale of it or discussion about it or anything else. And as a matter of fact, I remember some of you saying you were opposed to it. Now, as a result of somebody named Mr. Roger, I think of Mr. Rogers on television, but Mr. Roger, who stands to make a whole pile of money, and I'd be interested to know how much council and us, the shareholders, have paid him so far, but I'm sure I'm not going to get that. But the whole thing has come down to this idea of selling it. For what reason? You all said either not for it, or you never mentioned it. 2 years from now, there's another election. If you are so adamant to have a referendum, or better still, if you're so adamant that you think this is in the best interest of the town, then when you run for re-election, or anyone else who chooses to run for re-election, let them state that position at the next election. You can save the cost of a referendum, which I think is, I'm sorry, I just can't get positive about spending $95,000 right now to spend to a referendum that you know is iffy at best. The election will bring out the opportunity for people who believe in this to say it or not say it. It can be an issue or dead issue, or if you choose to, you can hold your referendum at the 2018 election, and it won't cost you a nickel because you're already paying for the election. Secondly, and in regards to that whole idea of an election, someone will say to me, I'm sure someone's going to say to me, oh yes, but the incentives, the 30% tax incentive is gone in December of 2018. Well, the gentleman just before me already said that the Premier's already announced that her policy is flawed to start with. And secondly, if she still strongly believes after December 2018 that the sale of distributions is appropriate, I think you can dangle the carrot in front of her that they will reinstate that. If they really want it sold and they want amalgamations, she'll come up with an incentive to help you along in that decision. So, Your Worship, members of Council, I'm asking you, as others have done tonight, defeat the referendum tonight, bring forward a motion without notice to end any discussion of Wasaga distribution at this time, and leave it until the next council election of 2018.
Thank you, Stan. Good evening.